So today, me and you are going to break down the essentials of ink sketching. No overcomplicating, no fear, just you, your pen, and pretty cool art. The idea is to show you some principles, really key things, which will turn simple drawings into quite fantastic, fascinating works of art. So, grab a pen, and another key thing, any pen will do. This is not something which needs some specific fancy pen. Any pen, and this video will be relevant to your sketching. So, what do we need to do to start? Well, we need to start. And when I start really, really light. Now, I can't overstate what I mean by that. I really mean starting with very light, very gentle, almost barely visible lines. And you can do this with any pen just by being really gentle and holding your pen gently on the page. And why start with such wonderfully light lines? Well, you'll find that light lines are, of course, flexible. You can change them. They're forgivable because you can make mistakes, and they're, well, I ran out of air, so I went with friendly because that's a nice thing for something to be. Now, whilst you're using your light lines, don't be afraid to make them wander around. These lines will fall back into the distance when you develop your sketch. And that wandering line lets you develop something interesting, creative, perhaps textural, perhaps a little bit abstract. And this is, I think, a wonderful thing. You might be thinking at this point, well, great, we're going to develop this, but where do we go from here? And what we do, we take this chaos and we add some boldness. And those bold touches are where we start to develop our scene into something else. And that's as true for something as simple as the previous sketches and something as complex as this sketch. And as a wise man is saying to you now with his goose, you must trust the process. So what we do now, we go bold. Now this doesn't mean that we make every single line really bold. It means we look at what's happened and we adapt. We put a few bold lines in the places where they work. We introduce darkness and shadows. And we just develop our sketch forward. And these little bold lines, you'll see them suddenly jumping off the page. See how clear a little penny plant becomes now compared to the church, just through the addition of a few simple bold lines. The most important thing to do here is don't overstate things. We're still not being aggressive, we're still not being really firm. We are allowing our bold lines to just tell a bit more of the story with a bit more certainty. I'm just going to sneak in here with a little bit of self-promotion. If you like these videos, I have a load of online courses, including my free course, which you might like even more. They're kind of like this, but more in depth, and I give feedback on everything you post. There's a free course as well. You can give that a go and see if you like it. Tip number 3, simplicity is king. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, take these simple people, just a few simple shapes on the page, and our page looks like it's full of people. We don't need to complicate things more than that if we don't want to. Now, starting simple, both right now, we could start a sketch nice and simply and develop it. But also, if you're a beginner artist, if you start simple, you'll be able to make a sort of stepwise progression towards complexity. Whereas if you just try to start really complicated and do everything amazing the first time, you know what? You'll give up. It'll be too hard and it'll be too stressful. Again, I hear you saying, you know what, but that's great. I don't just want to be simple. But I would argue that this is a very simple drawing right now of the skyline of London. But there's more, because if I just keep going, if I keep those initial lines light, then I go bold, then I add a bit more detail, well, I would argue this is no longer a really simple drawing of a London skyline. Now, I'm going to call this tip 3.5, but tip 3.5 is, if you see something on social media and someone says it took 5 minutes, if it really looks like it didn't take 5 minutes, it didn't take 5 minutes. All of these reels, everything is sped up, even if it's just a little bit. And it can be really hard to notice until it's sped up loads like this. So don't expect yourself to finish something complex in a minute. Trust the process and let the magic happen. Now, tip 4 is a big one, and you're going to have to bear with me because I have a really silly analogy. The reason I have a silly analogy is because just out there, outside my window, I met Dave the other day. Now, Dave is a spider, and Dave was building his web. But I couldn't see it because his web was white on the white sky. He had no contrast. Now, as soon as Dave decided to move his web to be against the beautiful greens, we can see it. It's beautiful, it's fascinating, really interesting to watch. And it's interesting because there is now contrast. Contrast is where you have light things and dark things next to each other. That makes them stand out, and that makes things more interesting. For example, I had a lot of fun building this robin up. Really light outline, notice the lightness. But this time, instead of just going straight into a bold outline, I focused on the contrast. And notice how this one is sped up. This one didn't take me 5 minutes. But by gradually building up the contrast, we develop that boldness, but we also have this interesting tone going throughout. And I haven't really drawn many distinct lines, and yet I quite like it. Pretty cool. On to number 5. And if you watch this channel, you already know this one. If you don't watch this channel, I'm about to blow your mind. Mistakes are fun. Mistakes are what makes our art interesting. Mistakes are kind of our process. They're part of our style. And mistakes are the magic which we can't control. And those happy accidents which turn things into a lot of fun. There's lots of ways of playing with the idea of making mistakes. Let your lines wander and wobble. We kind of already did that with our spidery loose lines at the beginning, but I'd really encourage you to do that. The other thing is just learning to cope with stuff which happens. Now I'm going to blur this out because it's a sensitive subject, but what if the ink spills on the page? Now I know for many of us that is a life-ending, ruining event. It ruins everything, we can't possibly continue, but why not, just for the sake of it? See what you can do with that mistake. See how you can make it interesting. A few bits of texture, a few lines, adding more contrast. And maybe we get a house, or maybe we get some kind of weird abstract fish. Tip number 6. There are no ink lines in the world. Believe it or not, well, there are a few, I suppose, but they're mostly on pages. When we draw a house, we draw it so well. When we draw a little window, we pick out all the bricks and the window panes. None of that is real. That is our interpretation. The reality is blocks of colour, blocks of texture that our brain interprets and finds edges in. So it's all abstract anyway. So have fun. Allow yourself to change things. My favourite way of playing with this, which I want to show you, is, well, the sky's not flat, the sky's not white. Maybe the sky's hatched. And you can spend ages just making an interesting hatched sky, which will potentially offset your art in a really fascinating way. So don't get tied down to the idea that the world has to be exactly as it is on your page. Because as soon as you picked up your pen, the world doesn't look like that. The world is not made up of black lines. Last but not least, the most important tip. Be you and don't apologise. Now what do I mean by this? Well, I don't mean, go and rob a bank. Probably say sorry if you do that, and probably don't be that guy. But what I do mean is enjoy what you do. Enjoy your style. Now, you might want to change your style. You might want to develop it. That's great. Do that. That's wonderful. That's what I'm trying to do all the time. But I also try and enjoy what I do at the moment. For me, this means exploring a few different ideas, trying a couple of different pens, doing things quick, occasionally doing things slowly, getting out and about, having fun. What does it mean for you? Because that is the important bit. So what are your top tips? What are your top tips for inking? What are the things you've learned which you think I need to learn? Because there's plenty of comments out there that say I need to learn a lot, and I would love to learn it from people I trust. With that, I will see you in the next one.